turned into has been really good to us. We're working in Zambia right now, where I manage work. The work in Africa is going, as I described, like a bushfire with a wind behind it. I mean, the gospel is moving at such a pace. Zambia, when they first... They can hear me. Oh, it's this one you're picking up. All right, sorry. So you weren't hearing me singing through this thing. Is it on? There we go. Okay, cool. Yeah, when we first asked to build in Zambia years ago, there was 611,000 members in the church, and they were asking us for 3,500 churches. They now have around 1.4 million members. This is since 2010, 2011. They're moving the gospel really serious over there. Is this thing responding? Malawi has 500,000 members. We did a bunch of work there. Zimbabwe has over 800,000. This thing seems to not be... There we go. And what we find in these countries typically is churches meeting under a grass temporary shelter or under a tree. You know, members start a little branch somewhere out of a mother church, and they throw up some kind of shelter to get out of the sun. When the rain comes, often this is just leaking like a sieve. It's just mostly shade. It's not providing rain shelter. And the termites immediately go to work. It's like setting a buffet, like a salad bar in front of termites, and they just move in, and you can see those. That's all termite activity. And they eat the grass, they eat the sticks, they eat the timbers, and I've joked with people that it's like they have a union contract, in labor relations. As long as they're not on strike, they're all holding hands, and it keeps the church up. And then if you have a breakdown in relations and they let go, then the thing comes down. But so it's a constant process of just building, using for a couple years, and making another one. So it's and these are. Did you move it? Okay. This is a mud stick structure, so the mud walls might stay up, but the rain leaks through the grass, and then it starts to deteriorate the mud walls, and then they come down, and it's this is inside. We're doing site visits where we go and meet with the church people and get the particulars about a church and what the needs are there, and of course they need a structure, but we get some information from them, and then our teams can come back in and do a build. And the church sets the priorities for us. We're a responsive ministry, so we don't go out and determine where need is. They give us a list and the name of the church and the elder and the pastor and the contact details, and then we'll go and assess whether it's a fit or not. Sometimes we find a place that's, has a metal roof over some simple structure. Well, we don't replace churches that already have a metal roof. It's the metal roof that's the thing that they just can't get. Subsistence farmers don't make enough money to put the roof on the place. So this is how we travel around the bush. Pick up, off-road trailer if I have other people with me, or we haul Bibles in the back of that, and there's a little stove that would come down and we'd cook meals. My wife and girls would go with me until the girls got a little older and they'd had a little too much of that bush camping and showering beside the trailer kind of thing, so bathing out of a little basin, so I couldn't get them to come with me all the time for some reason. But anyway, what's that? Well, they were in school too. Oh, that was a learning thing going on. Yeah, that was another. It was hard to do lessons and write in the back when we're jumping around in the four-wheel drive, So we were doing site visits up in northern Malawi one time, and the girls and my wife were with me, and very hilly, mountainous country, and we were, up and down through these washed out, gullies and river bottoms and whatever, and we had a pastor with us, and we site visited the whole day. And we got to this T in a road. I say road, it's just a dirt trail where a goat went, and then someone followed the goat, and then some little pickup came, and then they called it a road, And right at that junction, Hit the next slide there. I heard this big bang. Right across the road was the pastor's house, and we were going to camp in his yard that night, set up our tents, and I heard this big bang, and I got back to look, and the receiver hitch that goes inside the bumper there, they had extended it when we first got the thing and welded a piece of pipe together and extended. Well, that weld had broken. I'd used it for years, and it snapped, and that pipe came out and then hung up just out like this. So I dropped the bogey wheel, down onto the ground, and we just pushed the trailer across the road to the pastor's yard all day. I mean, we were down in canyons and up four-wheel drive, low range. I mean, it could have broken anywhere. And and the safety chain goes down over the ball. So if that would have broken off, the trailer could have just gone anywhere. I mean, it wouldn't have been following us. So we realized that the Lord had kept that together until that moment when it didn't matter. And so this was Friday afternoon. Next morning, I drove down 15 kilometers to a village. They had some guy had a homemade welding machine, and his welding skills were limited. And he let me use his welder, and I welded the hitch in. I just put it in there and did a complete weld around the tube, and we no longer took that out. And then I went back and got the family, and we went off to church. But that was God's watch care, traveling around with us all day there. Let's hit the next slide. So, Jesus talked about wondering whether he would find faith when he came back. Well, we were up in northern Malawi, and nobody had told these people that we were coming. They knew we were in the country. We were building in the south of Malawi, and they'd asked us 1,300 churches there in the country. And because it was dry season, that was the time to go do site visiting up in the north. It's very hilly and mountainous and mud trails, and you just don't move around there in the rainy season. So Susan and I and the girls had gone up there and did the site visiting where we just told you about the trailer breaking. These people didn't know when Maranatha was coming or even if, but they stepped out in faith, and they had 29,000 bricks laying on the ground that they had just molded. And next slide. Here they are in another church already stacked up a kiln of bricks that they're getting ready to burn. And then follow with the next slide, shows head elder holding up bricks. He's like, we're ready. Come on, bring on the church. They'd start laying the brick walls up right away around the simple church structure that we would put up. So we found faith in northern Malawi. For sure, the Lord will find faith there. He'll find it here, I'm sure, too, with you guys. But anyways, it was interesting to see how these people had just all the churches had gotten the word, Maranatha's in the country. We have to mold bricks in the dry season, Can't do it in January when it's pouring rain. And so they were all molding bricks and moving forward. Go ahead and next slide. So this is what they do with a one-day church. This is after they'd bricked up the walls. They do a nice job. Every area has a different style of construction in Africa, so they don't all look like this. But this was in Malawi. Check the next slide out. This is in western Zambia. Susan and I did a trip around there a couple years ago after a project, and these were just examples of different ways that they finished off their church and put the walls up. And sometimes it takes a couple years before they actually get the walls up. They'll worship in it right away, but it takes time for them to get the money together, to gather the materials, there's factors that play into how soon it happens, but they do finish them off, and that's really a blessing to see.
think maybe okay, there we go. David and I work together as a team, and I'm usually the behind-the-scenes person, but I decided I wanted to share something this morning about a project we got to be part of last year. January 8, 2022, a storm came through, and I know there could be some of you here that helped towards this church, but there was a church called Bethsaida up in northern Zambia, and people had gone out from a potluck, not a potluck, sorry. They'd gone out to do ministry after church. They hadn't even eaten yet. They came back because it looked like a storm was coming, and they were sheltering in the church. Not the whole church, together, but it was whoever had just been out. And as they're sheltering there, this storm comes up. And the sky's dark and the clouds block the sun. the rain came down in bucketfuls. And if any of you have been in different countries where, I don't know if it comes down in bucketfuls here, but it just comes down hard, hard, hard and fast. There was lightning, then hail started hammering on the metal roof, and the wind picked up and got really crazy, and suddenly the roof shuttered and everything fell down and collapsed. People were in the church, okay? There were cries of young and old, and some of them went silent. They lost 5 people in that church, including a young mother of 5 and her baby, a 6-month-old baby, and also the head elder who was a father of 4. They died that day. And there were 16 more who suffered significant injury. We got to, and Maranatha was told about the project pretty soon on. Actually, we have some pictures of
The next slide there.
Yeah, there's the church right near, not too long after it collapsed, and then the area there. And they asked Maranatha, can you help us? And so we were blessed to be a part. Dave mentioned that he works in Zambia. He also actually is the North American project director, so that's kind of how we're in the States some as well. So he kind of has, we lived in Africa for many years, but now we also work in North America some. And I work with the medical side of things at Maranatha. But anyway, so we had the collapsed church, and Maranatha asked if people would help towards it, and there was a fund raising that went on, and a lot of people gave towards this church, and we were blessed to be part of the the team that went over and started laying the blocks on this church. You can turn to the next one. Here's one of the ladies that was injured during that time. Now, when we went over as a group, I asked the pastor, I said, can we go and meet on our very first Sabbath that we're meeting? Can we go and meet your members, people who are impacted by this? I mean, you got a grieving congregation. They've lost a lot of, they not only lost their church, they lost a lot of their members, a lot of hurting hearts. And I wrote down here, I was watching closely with an awkward smile as a volunteer leaped up and hugged a crusty old man who was limping toward us. He was barefoot and sporting an imitation leather jacket over his well-worn, dusty trousers. The frail man stepped back, but he soon melted into the warm embrace. The 2 men were clasping hands, and I watched a tear sliding down this elderly man's face. The rest of us followed our friend's example. We greeted and shook hands and extended hugs. Tears continued trickling down this old man's cheeks. They created a wobbly track through his dusty wrinkles. And I thought, what amazing love and compassion I'm sensing here. This was Jesus in action. No one seemed worried about the man who was dirty. He had infected, oozing eyes. No one was worried about that at all. Instead, we sat down on the grain sacks on this carefully swept, hard-packed courtyard and visited with Mary and her husband, Frederick. And this brought a lot of joy to my heart because we got to go around and visit a lot of different people. We met the grandmother who was taking care of the 4 children whose father had died in that church. It was really hard meeting her because she was still in shock, really. She wouldn't smile. She, not that somebody has to, but I mean, you could tell that she was really struggling with this. And she had these 4 little kids that she was taking care of because their mom had to go somewhere else to try and support the family and have some kind of work to support all of them. But anyway, it was really neat to be able to meet these people. One thing we learned, we can go ahead and here's meeting some of the folks out there, is that we learned that this was during what we call the hunger season in Africa and different countries where you're in between crops. You've eaten everything that you had and now you're waiting for the next crop to ripen. And so people would maybe have 1 meal a day if they were lucky. So we were blessed. We can go ahead and turn to the next slide here. We decided to try to give them supplies for each home for a month, a big bag of cornmeal and some other different supplies, and then also a Bible in their Bemba language, and that was really exciting to be able to go. This was another one of the ladies who was injured in that church collapse, but it was just a real privilege to be able to be part of ministering to people and singing with them, lift up the trumpet and loud let it ring, Jesus is coming again. And then I want to show you a couple more pictures of, this is their new church. This is the church that funds were raised to build there in Bethsaida. And I'm not sure if we have pictures of it. There's one more slide, I think, with pictures of the church. But in the background there, we were able to build with funds a whole primary school. So they not only received a church, they also received a school there for their kids, and they're so excited. And the local school nearby is a government school. They had over 1,200 kids in like 5 classrooms. They were hot seating them where the kids would come at different times during the day so everybody could get some kind of education. But anyway, this school and campus is going to be such a big blessing there in Zambia, and we were just privileged to be a part of it. So I wanted to share that with you this morning.
Yeah, that church, this way this photo shows, it's hard to tell the size of it, but it's a very large one. We don't build this style. We only built one other one like this up in Kenya. And we estimate the church to fit 500 people, in our style of, and the pastor, the conference president, we were there in July, and there was, I don't know how many, we had 500 chairs and they were full. But they said, we'll put 1,000 in here, no problem. And now we've put benches in there. I haven't gotten pictures back, but we've put pews in the church. And with pews, they just push over. There's never, like a minibus, I refer to minibus style of full. I mean, it's until the cheeks are pressed up against the glass, you're not full. You just keep pushing another one in and then slam the door, And so on the church, it's the same way. If you're on a pew, they just keep pressing over, and you're up against the wall, and now we're full. So Psalm 91. Oh, this is, just a minute, I jumped ahead of myself. Yeah, the Tata, this is a truck made in India, and I bought this truck in South Africa. It's an all-wheel drive, short wheelbase with a Cummins motor, and we used it in Malawi and brought it into the country. We were the only ones in the country with a truck this style. And I got a call one night. We were building churches with a group from Laurelweld Academy, or is it Laurelweld or Laurelwood? Something in Oregon. They came over to build 26 churches, and they had 3 teams, and they would move out to these different sites each day, and our teams were really busy logistically moving the tools, scaffolding, generators, all this stuff ahead of them, plus delivering a church building on the site, and they were building 3 a day, so we were just busy picking up tools from a previous site, going to the next one. Our teams were working into the night. I got a call around 7:30, 8 o'clock one night from one of my team members, and he said the Tata drive shaft had come apart, and he didn't have tools with him, and he's, of course, stranded out in the bush. He gave me a GPS coordinate, and I wandered through the tea estates in southern Malawi and up and down hills and into villages and start to go down one trail and realize, no, the arrows, it's over here. And eventually I found him. I had tools, and I pulled the drive shaft out. Well, it was a short shaft about this long, had a flat flange on each end with a series of bolts around it. And of course, 2 universal joints. Well, it was hammered. It wasn't just a little bit bad. It was junk. And I'm thinking, we're going to be at least a week or 2 down to get parts out of South Africa. There was a Tata dealer, but they didn't stock parts for this truck, and you had to order everything in. So I get back to Blantyre that night, and the guy, Brundy Laporte, who was with me, his dad was our mechanic guy. They worked together, and he said to me, he says, well, let's go down to the black market tomorrow morning and see what they have. Well, the black market is not an illegal market. It's just what they refer to as a black market. It's an informal market. It's not a storefront. It's just people with stuff, piles of all kinds of stuff. I think you could probably build a truck out of there if you sifted through the piles enough. But so we went there, and there was a bunch of these runners that have nothing to do with selling anything. They're just trying to become part of the deal. You show up with something, and they come rushing up. What are you looking for? And so we show them this drive shaft, and we keep it. We don't let one of them run off into the weeds with it. 15, 20 minutes, we're standing there, just mobs of people all around us, moving, and we're standing there waiting. And eventually, one of those guys that ran down in there came up with a drive shaft, and I was hopeful that we would find one that was longer but had that type of ends on it. We had a lathe at the shop. We could cut it down and weld it and make one. He came out with the exact part. Yes, wow. We're like, whoa. And the price was cheap. I was like, he told me the money, and he of course, is up the price because he's making something on the middle. Whatever the guy down in there is getting, he's going to get something out of this deal. I happily peeled off the cash for him, and we went home. We went back to the shop. This is like 10 in the morning. We pumped grease into it. The universals were still good. I mean, that truck is still working in Zambia, and this happened in 2010 or 11 or something like that. 10, maybe 11 probably. And we're still using it with those same universals in it. And when the Lord put that in that junk pile, I have no idea, but we knew it was a miracle for us to find that exact part. and come out of there. And by 1 o'clock, the truck was back moving parts and tools and making it happen. And we were just, praise the Lord, as he watched. He gave us so many of these examples where you just knew he was just tuned in totally what we're up to, same thing in your lives. Not like you have to shout and make a loud noise to get his attention. He positioned that thing. I mean, they sifting through the pile. I don't know if he put it there right then or if it was laying there for years, but we were certainly grateful. Go ahead to the next slide. Psalm 91, we're all familiar with this. He will call upon me and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. We had been invited to come to Malawi to build churches, and I had moved up there with my family in the fall of 2009 to get logistics started, import containers. This is when we were shipping containers from the States with the one-day church parts. And our teams were still actively building in Mozambique, and Malawi is nestled into Mozambique, up in the north of Mozambique there. So it was April of 2010 when we actually were ready to build our first one-day church. And on a Wednesday, not yet. On a Wednesday, we built our first one-day church, and I had an office in my home, and I had a safe in the office, and I had the key in my drawer, and I used the combination, and for some reason I would lock it with the key too, which was kind of pointless because the key always was right in my desk. But anyways, that was my practice. Well, I never took the key out of the office. That day, I took the key with me. For some reason, it ended up in my pocket. I never saw it again. So the safe couldn't be open. This is on a Wednesday. We built our first one-day church, and Sunday, water specialists from Northern California were coming down from Ethiopia to work at Malamulo Hospital on their water system, and they'd been there before, and we called the guy that was bringing them down from the airport, said, hey, would they like to stay with us for the night? And they said, that'd be great. Malamulo's not ready for us. It'd be awesome. So they came to our house. They had two little small children, babies, and they had been with us before and would put these little tents up in the room to keep the mosquitoes and malaria and stuff from getting to their children. And we had this guest room at the far end of the house. Our bedroom was on the left at the end of the hall, and then straight ahead was this big ensuite, they call it, with a bathroom, big area, and a sitting room and a kitchenette kind of thing. Yeah, go ahead and show the next picture there. So this is a sitting area, and there's a kitchen to the left and stuff. So we eat supper, visit a little bit, we all go to bed. 1 o'clock in the morning, our friend wakes up, the woman. She had decided to put the babies right beside her bed that night. Usually she had put them in the sitting room off of the bedroom, but that night she put them beside the bed, and she awakened at 1 o'clock in the morning, heard something, sees a flash of light coming from this other sitting room. So she gets up to inquire, and there's a guy with a headlamp with a hacksaw, and he's sawing on the burglar bars to get in. So you cage yourself up at night. We have a fence around the yard, razor wire, bars on all the windows, big gates that come, you lock the gates. We have a watchman in the yard. We have 3 big dogs. We got a Rottweiler, a Rhodesian Ridgeback, Rottweiler Cross, and a German Shepherd. Now, they looked vicious. They were actually not so vicious, but anyways, they had that appearance of being a lion. Our friends would come on Friday night, have you put your lions away? We'd have it open the Sabbath together. And so anyways, this is how we lived. We cage ourselves up with all the security around you, and we're going to sleep. So here somebody has come over the wall, and they're sawing on the bars, trying to break. They've already broken the glass, and they're trying to break in here. So she quickly goes and gets her husband, wakens him. He's putting his contacts in. She comes to my door, and the door was open. 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm sleeping. Kung, kung, kung. David, somebody's trying to break in the house. And out of this 1 o'clock fog, my first response was, now? No, it was yesterday. I'm just letting you know about it now. Yeah. No, it's a present thing, So we jump up. My mind became very clear quickly. I didn't continue to ask foolish questions. But so we run down to the living room, and there's motion lights in the backyard that big spots would just light things up. We cycle the switch, and the backyard just becomes like day. Well, there's a porch under the house, under the roof, that was kind of inset with a porch roof over it, and there's big columns, and there was welded tubing with a gate that separated the yard from that porch area. And then in the porch area were doors into different parts of the house. One into the room they were trying to break in, and one into the living room, and one into my office. So my wife and I opened the door of the living room and went out into that porch area. We're still behind this, tubed off place. And my wife shouts to these people, go away, this is God's house. And 6 people were behind the house when we turned the lights on, and they ran over under a tree, maybe 30 feet away from the house. And I don't think they were there 20 seconds, and they immediately came back to that window. So we're running down the hall to go to that room, and I asked my wife, go ahead and click the photo, the next picture. This is the window they broke open that night they were trying to cut. And so we run back down there. My wife says, maybe take a picture of them. That'll scare them away. So she hands me a camera as I'm running into the room, and the guy's got the headlamp, and he's back cutting on the bars with a hacksaw. So when he sees me starting to try to take pictures, he drops down. Any of you have run a hacksaw, it's hard to run at periscope depth, where you're like stroking. So they give up on cutting on this window, and they all go over towards that porch area where it has the gate there. So we run back into the living room. Now my friends are looking for stuff in their bags, looking for some pepper spray. My wife's on the phone calling ADRA, calling Maranatha people, calling an Avenus family up the street that live. There's no 911. If you go out to police, you got to bring a can of diesel fuel and dump it in the Land Cruiser. If there's air in the tires, then they might be able to come. It's that kind of deal. They don't call and have them rush to your aid. So she's making all these calls. I'm by this door, and the biggest guy in the group had a big steel pry bar, and he starts reefing on the lock on that gate up there. He's just like prying and ripping on this thing. Go ahead and go to the next one. So this is the door in the living room that I'm standing by and looking out at an angle to the gate that goes out into the backyard. So my friends come to me with pepper spray while he's working on this thing, and in the dark, we're figuring out which is the dangerous end of this stuff to point away from me, and it's armed, and I've got it here, and so I've unlocked the door there. It's an old skeleton key lock from like the 17th century, they're still using them, and it's not all that secure. I'm all these bars on the window, but the lock is kind of useless. So I unlock it, I'm holding it with my hand, and I got the pepper spray, and they break maybe 2 minutes. He's reefing away, and he just rips it right out of the tubing, and the gate flies open. So a smaller guy, he wasn't the bravest one, the smaller guy comes rushing. Go ahead and take the next picture. So this is where they ripped out of the tubing up on the top. The next day we showed that, where they just had ripped the thing apart. So I open the door. These 2 guys rush in, and they're 3 feet away from me. They're like 3 tiles out from the door. And I just like this, and I spray them with the pepper spray. Well, they duck down as they didn't expect me to open the door, but they get a load of it. And it blows back in my eyes. I was just testing to see if it worked. It was very effective, yeah. My eyes are burning immediately. And so they run off. And now they're afraid to approach the door because, I've done something they didn't expect. And so with the door shut and locked, they start coming through into this gate, and then they're throwing these soft homemade bricks like I showed you in that earlier photo. They're not terribly hard, and they don't have sharp corners. They're throwing them. 2 or 3 of them came flying in and hit the glass door. And it didn't break the glass, but huge noise, Then a guy comes in, and I'm telling my wife, I said, bring me something to swing. I'm standing there in my night clothes, and these guys have machetes and steel bars, and, So my friend had a steel bar he took out of his tool bag, and then she brought me a hammer. And I'm a carpenter, so I knew which end to hold on to. And so I'm standing there waiting for these guys, and I'm like, they're just, keep assaulting us, shouting, give me money. So some guy comes up to the door, next picture. This guy here, this isn't Olin Mills quality photography, but the stuff's bouncing off the glass, the flash and everything. But he's slamming in with a piece of wood they cut in our yard, and it breaks through and cuts my hand where it comes through the glass, and he's shouting, give me money. Well, I couldn't open my safe if there was money in it, I had just lost the key, and there's no chance I could open the thing up. And they're not going to believe me, as they're threatening me with a machete. It wouldn't have been a good conversation to be having. So this is just going on, and lots of noise and shouting and banging and whatever, and we're pretty nervous. My friend and I are both big guys, and this isn't going well. What we just figured they should be going away. They see we're awake. No, they're coming in. They're intent on coming in. And so after all this nonsense is going on, I said to my friend, I said, what are we going to do? We can't guard every door around the house. I didn't say that to him, but I'm thinking that. I said, they can switch and go to a different place, and they just come in somewhere else. I said, what are we going to do? He says, let's pray. And I said, good idea. Exact words. And we both called on the name of Jesus, not screaming, not shouting, just, Jesus, come, we need you now. And that fast, they turned and ran. The moment I said the name of Jesus, they turned and they fled. All of them. There was 6 guys up there, and then our watchman was tied up over the bank. We started hearing this calling out noise. We weren't real brave to open the door once they disappeared. We had this terraced yard, and we thought, well, maybe they're going to come back. We're just up against the glass. It's all of a sudden quiet, and we start hearing this calling. It was our guard, and our friends showed up. My colleague came in with a Nissan pickup on the rim. He had hit a pothole into our neighborhood so hard that it actually rolled the tire off the rim, and he came driving in like that. And another guy brought a watchman from the hospital with a shotgun, and they fired a round off. And we had to break the lock to get our own gate open because they had stolen the coat with the keys from our watchman, and so we couldn't even open the gate. We had to bust the lock, and our friends came in, and then the police came. And but earlier on, when we first went out on the porch, one of our dogs was over barking by the guys, a German Shepherd, but appeared sick, and the big Rottweiler was over to this side and kind of out of the mix, barking but acting wobbly. They had poisoned our dogs, and one of the dogs was hiding. And once we went outside and found the dogs, we brought them in, and the German Shepherd was convulsing, bleeding, just really in bad shape. I think they used rat poison or something. And Susan had a big bottle of charcoal that some volunteer had left and put it in water, powdered charcoal. And the dog was so weak she couldn't even lift her head up. She's on the floor, just like lapping out of the bowl. And she got a lot of it, and she was very thirsty. And the charcoal absorbed the poison, and full recovery on all the dogs. So we praise the Lord about that, But we weren't inclined to go back to sleep that night. We were a little on the edge there, And so we spent the rest of the night in prayer and thanksgiving. And our daughters were like, "Daddy, I wish God would replay the DVD." Like they wanted to see what happened. What did these people see? We don't know. But something happened. It wasn't our calling. We didn't make big noise. It wasn't like we're just standing behind the glass talking to the King of the universe. And he came. And these guys ran, and boy, were we happy about that. It was very nervous, but the Lord says he'll come when you call, and there's power in the name of Jesus. I can testify to that. So, there you go. Thank you. We had built the first one-day church. Do you think Satan was happy we were building churches in Malawi? If we had left, if my family had packed and left, which a lot of our friends expected us to do, they said the Woodses are going to be out of here. And I just felt like, it was scary, but it was a faith-building experience. To know that the King of the universe was paying attention to what we were doing. I said, how can we run from this? We need to stay. And our team built 934 more churches. You look at a map of Malawi with all the flags, and it's just like we took a paint roller to the whole country. There's churches everywhere. And so the Lord won, It was his battle, and he had it all figured out, and praise the Lord for that. But anyways, we stayed around and finished our job there. So, next picture. Next one. Okay, so one night we had this student missionary come over, and he was mid-20s. He was going to do some videography and work with our one-day church team into Malawi, and he had very little driving experience, as I observed immediately. I joked that he might have gotten his license from a bubblegum machine or whatever, but it was a nice guy. He was an asset to us. A lot of good things happened, but the driving thing was definitely a shortfall. So his suitcase didn't come with him, and when you show up in a foreign country and you don't have clean underwear and clean socks and whatever, that's a problem. It's hot. It's you want to change every day. So he didn't have any clothes, and so every day he's calling the airport, "Where's my suitcase?" And it took like a week or two before they found it somewhere on the planet, and it ended up in Malawi. So that evening, "Hey, my suitcase is here." I said, "Well, go get it." So he heads out of town, and the airport's quite a ways out of Blantyre because it's just hilly and mountainous around there. So he drives on the way back in with the suitcase, and he calls me, and he said, "The truck quit working." He said, "I don't know if it's out of diesel. I came and put diesel in it, but I don't know if that's the problem. It's still not working." Well, it was a diesel pickup. He had the right fuel. That was good. And so I said, "Where are you at?" And he says, "I'm out near this roundabout where you're just starting to come in off where the road splits many directions." And so I drove out there. He's right near a bar up above and the roads are very narrow, not terribly narrow, but there's no shoulder. They just drop off into deep ditches. They build these deep ditches like a meter deep, line them with stone or brick because of all the runoff. It's very hilly, and you get big rain, and there's lots of water. and there's no guardrail. So, I mean, if you're texting and driving, you end up in one of those ditches. And so, and in the evening time, the time he's moving back and forth, there's just tons of people walking. Not everybody has cars there. Most people bicycles or on their foot. They're going in and out of markets, right? They're heading home. So usually there's lots of traffic along the roads in pedestrian traffic. And so I go out there and I pull up in front of him. He's blocking part of the lane. People are going around him. And I hook up jumpers, nothing. It's not a problem we're going to solve along the road here. So I said, have you ever been towed before? He said, no. I've got this long kinetic energy tow strap where you can recover Land Cruisers or something stuck in the mud. And it's expensive. And you're meant to just dump the clutch and start launching the tow vehicle, and it stretches until it's done stretching and then yanks whatever out, So I said, keep it up off the road. Just apply a little brake as we're going downhill. Just keep the thing from dragging on the pavement. And I said, I'll go very slow, 12 miles an hour, 20 kilometers an hour I'm driving. My lights are flashing. He's in a white vehicle, but we're in the night, and it's curvy, mountainous roads. We're following around these curves. So we get down to the bottom. It flattens out, goes under a railroad overpass, and then there's a roundabout where you can go up into town, which is where we want to go. But you have to go around this side because we're driving the left side of the road. And I look up the hill, and there's a small car, maybe a Corolla or something, quite a ways up. And I'm first one there. I mean, I'm far ahead of this guy. So I'm like, well, I've got the right of way, and I just ease myself into the intersection. Well, I'm imagining this guy in the small car, he sees this gap between these two vehicles, and he goes, I can get between there. And he accelerates. So I'm imagining, this is a big, thick rope. This isn't going to break. I'm imagining a 3-car pileup. As he comes in, hits the rope, we all get sucked into a pile. Could go poorly, So I'm starting to go around, and I feel that this guy goes right between us. And we don't feel anything, not a bump, nothing. And my bumper on the Hilux is like this high, so the tow rope is like right at the grill of this small car. It would have to go up over the car or under the tires, and you would feel it. I mean, I'm in a tow. This rope is taut. He goes right through, and we don't feel a thing. And that happens quick, and I'm still driving around the corner. Well, as I start to go up, all of a sudden I'm like chained to a tree, and I put my clutch in before I stall the thing, and my friend is still going straight. So now we're perpendicular. I'm pulling straight perpendicular to his front end. He's not following me. So I jump out, I run back. Now cars are starting to pile up and hoot, you're blocking the traffic and they don't know what's going on. So I run back to him and he says, I can't turn my steering wheel. And I look in there, and he's got the key in the ignition, but he never unlocked it. I mentioned he didn't have a lot of driving experience, right? Well, I'm like, you have to unlock that before you can turn it, So we unlock it, I push him back, and then he gets turned my direction, and we go up there. So I get home, I don't know what time it was, 8 o'clock or 8:30, and the next, just shortly after that, I get a call from one of the guys stuck out in the bush with that Tata picture I showed you earlier was in the rice paddy. Go ahead and give the next picture. And so I get a call from my colleague, another guy, that he's got the truck stuck in the mud. So I go out that night with that same tow rope, and I hook my winch onto the truck, and I hook the tow rope onto a tree, and I have a double cab pickup. I was going to see if I could stretch it into a triple cab pickup, So I'm winching on this truck, and nothing happens. I don't get it out. So we give up. So the next day, we go out with another big Army truck, and this short guy on the right here, he was driving. He'd got the first one stuck, and then he got the second one stuck, and on the other side of the road. And so now we got two of them in there, and it was a while before we got them out. A few days later, we came in with a tractor and got it towed out. But while we're there, this Adam was with me, and I said, did you see those 2 miracles that happened last night? He says, no, what? I said, you need to pay closer attention. I said, last night, that car went right between us and through our tow rope, and it didn't hit you, we didn't even feel it. I said, that's a miracle, I think. And I says, I towed you 8 kilometers, 5 miles, around curvy mountain roads with deep ditches, people everywhere, and you didn't hit anybody? You didn't go in the ditch? I said, and you couldn't turn your steering wheel. How did that work? I mean, his wheel was locked. And I said, you followed me all that time and you couldn't turn your steering wheel. I said, I think that's a miracle. I said, the Lord is involved. 2 clowns in the night, towing around. And God's got time for that, right? I mean, he's paying attention to us in this, Africa thing. I mean, if we'd have wrecked our vehicles, that would have put back the work, slowed it down, whatever, And here he was protecting us from our own ignorance, And anyways, I just told the guy, just suggested, hey, pay attention. Lord's at work in our lives. I encourage you, pay attention each week. What God's involved in our lives. If we've talked to him and they're interested, he's paying attention. And when you see something like that happen, praise the Lord, and then tell somebody else. Share the story with somebody else, because people are blessed and realize that today Jesus is interested in what we're doing. It's not just, let's look in the Bible at what happened 2,000-3,000 years ago. It's actively involved right now with us, and it's a huge blessing. Next slide. You will tread upon the lion and the cobra. You will trample the great lion and the serpent. Because he loves me, says the Lord, I will rescue him. I will protect him, for he acknowledges my name. So my friend, go ahead and next photo. My friend, one of my colleagues was up in Zambia, and he had come into town and done something with a truck and got it going, had to head back to western Zambia, leading one-day church cruise, and he was going to spend the Sabbath in a game park along the Kafue River. It was kind of midway point. So he started driving back through the bush, and he was seeing game. These aren't his photos, but just to give an idea, you can click through the pictures. Birds. He saw elephant. There was in the bush, just no fences, wild animals, hyenas, lions, whatever. So he meets up with two guys that are stuck. They've got a boat behind their truck, and they're you can stop there. And he is offering to help them. So they've got a boat, they're going to a fishing camp, and they've got this all-wheel drive truck, but they managed to get it stuck. And so he helps them out, winches them out, and they said, come to our camp. They said, we've got food, and you can stay with us this weekend, and we'll take you fishing in the river or whatever. So he follows them to this camp. It's just a primitive bush camp. There's no buildings or whatever. And they set up, they cook food. And these guys were of a different tribe than he was, and they were lubricating themselves quite a bit that evening around the campfire, So they're nice, friendly guys. So they go to sleep, and they said, don't worry about because they heard lions, and they saw lions when they were driving in. And they said, don't worry about the lions. I sleep with a 9mm under my pickup, under my pillow, and my friend has a shotgun. We can sort this out, no problem. So, if lions come, don't worry. So my friend gets in his little tent on the ground and is sleeping, and the lions start roaring. And when you hear a lion roar, go ahead and put that slide. When lions start roaring, you can feel it. I mean, you can hear it. It'll travel 6 miles. You can hear their noise. But when they're close, it's like, wow. Just this huge roar. And they talk to each other, right? Well, when you're in your tent at night, they get your attention. You're not sure what they're saying, whether that one's on the buffet or not. But anyways, so put the next slide up there. See, this one's licking his lips like, oh, that looks like dinner, And so he's scared, and he's calling out to these guys that are in the tent with their guns near him, and he's shouting, and they're nothing. They're out cold, right? They've just drank quite a bit, and they're in a deep slumber, and they're not responding, and he doesn't have the guns. He's like, hey, guys with the guns, this is time for you to wake up and make some noise with those guns, Next picture. Those are the eyes of lions outside his tent. He's standing inside the tent in the middle, and he's screaming like a little girl is how he describes it. I mean, he is very scared, and I have no trouble understanding why. But the lions don't come. There's a watchman guy that hears his screaming, an African guy that had been there kind of watching the camp, and he comes with a sjambok, which is a hippo hide whip, and he's just cracking it. It makes a really loud sound, and he's shouting and cracking this whip, and he drives the lions off, which my friend was quite happy about. And the next day they had a nice time at the river, and he moved on. So this same friend of mine, the same colleague, the next picture, we're building a big school in Livingston, Zambia by Victoria Falls, and during the process of construction with block and cement and whatever, you have this rubble pile, which is broken pieces of whatever just get put into a pile. And at the end, he's digging in this red Kalahari sand behind the building a ways, just digging a big hole and then just put the rubble in, you know. So he's with the Bobcat, he's scooping up loads of this rubble, and he raises it up, and he gets a whole nest of cobras. He's got a whole bunch of small cobras, but they come fully armed, even the small models, you know, they're not, they're poisonous, and these are Mozambique spitting cobras. And so as he scoops it up, one of them comes over the back of the bucket and drops in the cab with him. And there's an emergency exit in the top. He says, I went up through that thing so fast. He's just like all of a sudden up on top, you know. And our Mozambican guys came with bricks, and they, you know, dispatched the cobras and killed them off. But so he's had the lion and the cobra experience. You know, it's real. I mean, God says this stuff. It's in His Word, and it's fully something you can count on. You know. But anyways, he's had plenty of adventure there. I had another colleague who was a student missionary from the States. He's now an internal medicine physician, and he was sleeping. Normally, he would put up a tent at night in the bush when he'd come back, you know, to wherever he was basing that night for the one-day church builds. And that night, he decided it was such a nice night, he would just sleep under the one-day church where he was based at, you know. Just so he laid his sleeping bag out on the ground under the tent, under the church. And the next morning, he got up, you know, doing you know, whatever he does when he gets out of his sleeping bag, and right beside him is a cobra coiled up against his sleeping bag. The cobra's still, you know, sleeping or whatever. I mean, he wasn't like, you know, poised to bite, but this snake came in the night and just coiled up right beside his sleeping bag. Oh my! I'm glad I didn't have that experience, but the Lord protects us out in the weeds, you know, while we're doing what He's called us to do, you know. How much time do we have? When are we supposed to be done? Another what? Okay, more stories. Next slide. Oh, there's a couple cobra pictures. That's a forest cobra. Next one. That's a Mozambique spitting cobra there. Not the one that was sleeping by him, but that's the kind. We saw this one in the bush at night. Okay, next picture. Next picture. There we go. There was an island off the coast of Maputo, Mozambique, that was, you could kind of see it if it was real clear. I don't know how far out it was, but they wanted us to build a church out there. And of course, we're building on land with trucks and whatever, and there's no big ferries to take trucks out there. So we decided to make this building project a team building thing. Like all our leaders are, you know, finance persons, our, you know, HR, whatever people were dealing in our team, we are all going to build this church. Our normal one-day church crews aren't going out there. So 3 o'clock in the morning, some of my guys, next picture, they put all the stuff into the hold of this dhow. They sail the eastern part of Africa, like the Arabs had these boats. Well, this is just a sailing boat. And they put the generator, scaffolding, the whole church down in the hold of this boat, and they're sailing out there, starting at 3 in the morning. We leave at, I don't know, whenever, 8, 9 o'clock. We get on a ferry with a motor that's going to take us out there. Next picture. And so we're on this ferry, we get out there. Well, the tide was out, and so we had to walk through the water to get, you know, they couldn't bring the boat into the dock. So we're walking in with a cooler. Susan had put a lunch together in this cooler box to feed our crew. And this is my daughter Janelle, and we're all walking in. So, next picture. So all the church parts, the team, when we got there, were unloading the boat because they had arrived and, of course, had to pack everything to shore. So the members people on the island were helping us. This is our country director now in Peru, Elmer. But so they're bringing all this stuff in. Next picture. They go to putting it, next picture, onto a tractor. Go ahead, another one. There you go. So they load everything in the tractor and they drive it up to the build site. So go to the next picture. So this is us building the church out there, and behind us you can see their little Kanisu church. It was a temporary kind of, you know, structure back there made out of reeds and stuff. And so many of the members and local village people were all excited that we'd come to work there, and they're all hanging around like the circus had showed up, and they're helping build and do stuff. So we build the church. It's very hot, and we get all done, and we're going to go have our lunch inside that church over there. So we get in the shade, and we start, you know, everybody on our team. Next picture. is sitting there having this food. Susan's mom is there on the left, and Susan and our girls, and Anu, who's the country director up in Kenya, she's there with her family. They worked with us there in Mozambique. And so we're all having a plate of food, nice plate of food. Well, then there's enough food, so the church members who were helping us build, the ladies said, well, let's let them eat with us, So they filled up plates of food for them. And then the next picture. So all those people got food, and then people kept coming to the door when they know, like something's going on in there. What's going on? I don't know if they smelled the food, but they kept coming to the door, and the ladies kept filling plates. And the last person that came to the door got a full plate of food. And this was a cooler. The Lord multiplied the food, and it was like, whoa! And then we didn't have the 12 baskets left over. I mean, they scraped out the bowl, made the last plate, but everybody who wanted food had gotten a plate of food. I mean, that's a crowd. We didn't bring food for that crowd, or the ones that kept showing up at the door. And it was like, whoa! Thank you, Lord. I mean, just interesting how God said, no, the rest of these people are hungry too, and the food just kept multiplying. So. Okay, next slide. Next slide. We're building a church up in Kariba, which is on the Zambezi River, and it's where Kariba Dam, where they dam up the Zambezi and make this huge reservoir. We're building a school there, Lakeview School. You can see the lake in the background, and it's a one-day structure, those steel side panels and stuff. So everything's going together with tech screws and cordless guns, right? Well, you're transferring 220 power down to 110 through a transformer and then running all these 110 chargers to charge batteries. Well, we got a whole bunch of volunteers. We got a bunch of our own team. And as with the voltage issues and whatever was going on, we were losing chargers. All week we were losing chargers. We got down to Friday, and we still have a whole lot of metal to put on the buildings, and we have one charger. And there was a lady that is going to Africa with us. Next picture. This is the structures after we're closer to being the finish line. And the next picture. So this Faye McAlpin, she had injured herself earlier, and we just assigned her the task. We'd carry her off the bus in this camp chair. She's mid-90s now, 96 I think. She's going to Africa with us next month. But this is like 10 years ago or something. I don't know. She is charging. She's monitoring the batteries. When she wasn't napping, she would be paying attention to which ones needed charging. And at the end of the day, so on Friday, she only has one charger to be able to put stuff on. And everybody's working. Everybody's out working. There are people that never changed their battery the whole day. There's some people that went dead and then went to the place and she had one ready for them, but everyone else is still working without recharging. Anyone who works with cordless tools and you're running tech screws, it's sucking battery. There's a point where all the lights are gone and the thing quits working, And the Lord just kept all those batteries filled up for the whole day, and we finished the school. And we were all in praise and thanksgiving for the Sabbath Friday afternoon. It's like, this is a miracle. I mean, how did this happen? Other than the Lord was keeping the batteries topped up. So, the next picture shows the Sabbath celebration in one of the buildings, like a big meeting hall that we. So God is at work each day. We were blessed to see it, and He's at work right here in your community. And surrounding areas and wherever you live. Just ask Him to lead you to people who need to know His love. Because there's a lot of hurting people out there. People's lives have junk in them, and causes them pain, and we can be the loving hands of Jesus to these people. And then watch for these miracles that happen where God's involved in stuff and gives you opportunity to interact with them, and they happen all around us. And I just encourage you all to be a part of that. And in your mission field, where you are right now, is to bloom where you're planted, as my friend used to tell me. So, thank you. One story left on there I won't tell. Well, there's one little video on there, she said. Would you rather the story over the video? All in favor of story? Video. I can't tell. I see you putting hands up for both of them. Anyways, I'll tell the story. So my friend and I were in the bush working on well drilling or doing something. I don't remember what the reason was, but we drove out of the bush along a really chattery, bumpy road for a long time. And one time I looked out my rearview mirror and I saw that the side of my canopy was up. It's got these spring-loaded things and latches down, and it was up. And as I look, I see some of his stuff falling out of my truck right as I look. That's not right. So we pull over, go back in there. I don't know what he put in there. It wasn't my stuff. So he says, oh yeah, this is all of it. We put it in there, we zip tie the thing in, close it, and hold it shut. So then we chatter along for more, 5 hours more driving that day. We stayed overnight at a hotel, a lodge along the road there. So the next morning we're at breakfast. We're sitting there, my phone rings, and the guy says, who is this, David Woods? And I'd identified myself as such, and I said, yeah. He says, I found a bag along the road, and I looked in there and I found your name and phone number, and so he's calling us, and he's a farmer back along the Chattery Road back there. So we find out where he is, and I said, well, we'll come back and get it. But I said, we're 5 hours away from where you are. We're not going to be there right away. And this is a guy using his own credits. You have to pay, you don't get unlimited minutes, you're scratching and entering codes, and so he's burning his phone time to call us. So I'm a little disappointed that we have to turn around and drive 5 hours back, but here we go, right? Well, it's the bag that has all the important documents, truck details, insurance documents. My friend with the vehicle, he manages the fleet of vehicles and stuff. It's got important documents, his own identification stuff. I mean, it's full of stuff that you need, right? So we're driving back. It's not like we dropped our lunch and said, no, go ahead and eat the sandwiches. We're going to go back and get it. So 5 hours, and this guy calls me twice on the way back. Are you still coming? I said, hey, we're on our way. It's 5 hours. We can't rush this. So we get there, and he hands us the bag alongside the road. We thank him profusely, and everything is in the bag. There's not one thing missing. Now, a lot of people would have just emptied the bag, kept the bag, tossed the stuff in the weeds, and this guy, just an honest guy, and we got it all back. And praise the Lord. I mean, that someone even found it. We wouldn't even have known where to go look, Anyways, so the Lord is there's many ways that the Lord is watching out for us. That's the end of my stories for this time. Now video, okay. We got sound?
My idea of what mission is has changed. I used to sit in church, and as the offering plate came through, put my offering in for the missions and call it good. Now, I feel like I can be a part of that mission and go out and make a difference.
Making a difference. Helping others. These are core Maranatha values. When it comes to mission, volunteers go and go again with Maranatha because, like Marty, they become the mission. Maranatha volunteers experience what it means to be the hands and feet of Jesus, the gloves and muscle of Jesus, the ears of Jesus, His embrace, His tears. Maranatha's mission results in connection, connecting people from all over the world, connecting some people's gifts with other people's needs, connecting communities of believers, connecting cultures, and creating new understanding of what is really significant in our daily lives. It is time to embrace the mission. It is time to be a Maranatha volunteer.